am going to do another tier list on Nintendo consoles. But this time, instead of home consoles, I'm going to make a tier list of the best handheld consoles. So, in the last video, we did, you may remember this exact tier list format that I created. And I modified it, and instead of and I deleted all the home consoles and replaced them with all the handhelds. So, also if you're curious, I'm using canva.com to make this video. Yeah, shout out to canva.com because they're the thing I'm making my video with, and you can make tier lists on there for free. All you need to do is sign in with a Google account or something like that. So let's get into the video. So first off, we are going to rank the original Game & Watch. So yeah, the first Game & Watch game in the series was created in 1980, and yeah. So I kind of have mixed feelings about it. Now, it was 1980, so of course they did have to use the limitations of technology at the time. Either make something like let's just say Atari 2600 or worse since they were handhelds, so they're more limited than home consoles. Or they could do what they did with the Game & Watch, make simple LCD games. Now, I don't exactly like them, but I admit they were pretty good for their time. And besides, they were pretty fun. I'm going to go ahead and put the original Game & Watch in B tier. So, next we have the dual screen Game & Watch, which is pretty much the same as the original Game & Watches, only basically the predecessor to the Nintendo DS. But we ain't ranking the DS, we're ranking the dual screen Game & Watch consoles. Now, I gotta say, having a second screen is an advantage, so it's going in B tier in front of the original. So next, we have the Game Boy, which was created in 1989. 9 years have passed since the creation of the original Game & Watch, and the Game Boy has some major improvements. Instead of the graphics are better, the sounds are better, since technology's had 9 years to improve. And the Game Boy is a huge improvement over the original Game & Watch, such as being able to swap your games out on the fly with cartridges instead of having to switch between one Game & Watch and the other. And yeah, I gotta say, the Game Boy is a pretty amazing console. Now, it does have its flaws, like having no backlight, because I know Nintendo was trying to make it to where battery would be saved, but at least make it to where we could see the screen. And also, there's a green tint in the background every time you play a Game Boy game. It's gonna go in A tier, because despite its flaws, it's still much better than the Game & Watch and the Game & Watch dual screen. Next, we have this. Yeah, you all know it. You either like it or hate it, and most people hate it. Now, The Virtual Boy was created in 1995, which is a few years after the Game Boy, and goodness, is it bad. Only red and black graphic. Sure, it is 32-bit, but it only has red and black graphics. It barely even qualifies as a handheld, since technically it's actually a tabletop console, and pretty much what Nintendo marketed as, it is pretty much a virtual reality console, except boy is it bad. Yep. But anyway, yeah, it's bad. Only has red and black graphics, which just gives you a headache, combined with the really bad virtual reality effects. Yeah, it is immediately going to F tier. It is one of Nintendo's worst consoles. It is one of Nintendo's worst consoles, even worse than the Wii Mini, which, yeah, you should check out my rage about it from the last tier list. And, yeah, it just makes you want to throw up, to be honest. It could have at least had color graphics, but, nope. Once again, Nintendo is trying to save money. And as for its sales, it sold, just when you think the Wii U sold bad, think wrong. You think wrong, because, the Virtual Boy sold, pretty terrible. I don't remember exactly how much, like about 700,000. Way worse than the Wii U's 13 million units. Yeah, by far. You don't want to end up like the Virtual Boy. So, moving on from that disgusting flaw, we have the Game Boy Pocket. I guess it is an improvement. I mean, the Game Boy wasn't that chunkier than the Game Boy Pocket, considering a Game Boy cartridge is able to fit in there perfectly. And I mean, it is slimmer than the original Game Boy, which I guess is an advantage, considering it fits in your pocket better. But still, did you really ask for this? Nah, you asked for just a Game Boy in general. You probably, if you're a kid growing up in the Game Boy era, you probably didn't even know this existed. It was made back in 1996. Most kids just asked for a Game Boy back during that Christmas season. Of course, along with the Nintendo 64 that also came out that year. But they ended up getting a Game Boy Pocket. They still liked it, as they didn't know that it was much different from the original Game Boy. However, it's going to go in A tier despite it not having much differences than the original Game Boy. And the reason why is that it doesn't have that green tint in the background anymore, which makes the graphics much easier. So moving on, we got the Game Boy Light, and oh my goodness! While you're still not able to see the screens of the Pocket and the original, you can still see the Game Boy Light screen. So yeah, obviously it's going into A tier, above the last two Game Boys. The only problem is that the Game Boy Light, it was a Japanese exclusive, which means us Americans like me, as well as people in the European Union, they could not purchase a Game Boy Light. If they wanted one, they had to travel all the way to Japan to get one, only to realize that their American Game Boy games would not work on it, and that they either had to mod the system entirely, or that they either had to mod the system entirely just to get their American Game Boy games to work on it, or they had to go all the way back to Japan to get Japanese Game Boy games. I'm not sure when it came out, but yeah, the Game Boy Light was pretty good. The only problem is, yeah. And next off, we have the Game Boy Color. Yeah. I mean, while it was an improvement due to the fact that kids actually asked for a Game Boy Color, not just the Game Boy in general, the sad fact is that it does not have a backlit screen. I mean, really, you already did that with the Game Boy Light, and that was a Japanese exclusive. Couldn't you have just been warming up just to add a backlight to the new Game Boy Color, which was basically just a Game Boy upgrade? No. You could only have either a backlight or color graphics. And in America, you didn't have any choice. You could just either get color graphics or just black and white graphics. Because, yeah, by the time I guess you could also get black and green graphics. But, yeah, it's going into A tier because it's still a pretty good console, despite the fact it doesn't have a backlight. But still, Nintendo's gotta get those backlights in. And will they do that with the next generation of handheld consoles? No. 'Cause this bad boy released all the way back in 2001, where pretty much all gaming equipment was getting upgraded. So, but the only problem was that the Game Boy Advance did not come with a backlight. I mean, it could have been so easy considering they did that years ago with the Game Boy Light, which was an 8-bit console only released in Japan. But no, this bad boy. So that's why it's going to be rated only in front of the first 3 8-bit Game Boys, but not the Game Boy Light. The Game Boy Light, despite the Game Boy advances, advancements, the Game Boy Light will still remain the best handheld that Nintendo's ever made. The best Game Boy that they've ever made. At least until this sucker came out. You know it well. Yep, it's the Game Boy Advance SP. So a lot of things are different about it. For one, when it's all the way folded out, it looks similar. It looks better. It looks a little bit more like the first 4 Game Boys compared to the Game Boy Advance's new design. And also, it is a clamshell design. It has a clamshell design that I find pretty similar to the Nintendo DS Lite. And it also has the ability to have a backlight for the first time in Game Boy and Nintendo history. Thus, it is the best Game Boy ever, period. I own one of those bad boys myself, and oh boy is it good. It is going into S tier, the first Nintendo console to ever do so. So, what's next? I mean, Nintendo's already released several Nintendo consoles that are handheld. However, they've all pretty much had the same name ever since the original Game Boy. So, what's next? The Game Boy, the Game Boy Pocket, the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Light, Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP. What could be next? How about the Game Boy Advance SPU? Nah, that wouldn't really work. The City Boy? Nope. Although that was a prototype name for the Nintendo DS. Yep, that's right. The Nintendo DS was originally planned to be a reboot to the entire Game Boy series. However, they ended up doing something different. For once, this new DS's design matches the design of an older console they made back in the early and late 80s. So yeah, it's going into S tier above the Advance SP. However, could there be a better design for this? Like a slimmer design? Yeah, the DS Lite, it's slightly better. It has a brighter backlight and a longer battery life. So, yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. DSi and XL, but we're rating it separately because technically the DSi XL. Yeah. So the DSi is okay, an okay upgrade to the DS and DS Lite. It does have a home menu. However, there's kind of one thing that the other DS models do better than this one. And that is playing Game Boy games. Game Boy Advance, that is. And thus, I'm going to have to put it in S tier, but below the Game Boy Advance, because of its inability to play Game Boy games. Actually, I have a better idea. Sorry, GBASP. Sorry. At least you're not like your big brother, which is currently hanging out with the first 3 Game Boy models. First 3, worst 3. So, we need a sequel to the DS's. How about the DS2? Nope. 3DS? Which, although when you first think about it, the name 3DS doesn't make any sense. However, it means it's 3D, and yeah, as you can probably tell, I'm putting it as, so far, the best Nintendo handheld consoles. However, we still gotta go through the whole evolution of handhelds. So, next up is the 2DS. That's a better name for a sequel to the DS, but by then, it doesn't even make any sense. I mean, it is good for people that are on a budget and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's not great. However, we cannot judge this very badly. So, let's make a bit of room for it. Right here. as it's probably going to be my first 3DS model. Because, yeah, I don't own a 3DS yet. I'm not like the cool kids. Why? Sorry, my little sister's in here. Hang on, guys. Sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. I had to do something real quick. Okay. So where do we put the 3DS XL? Now, yeah, this is obviously the dad of all 3DSs. This 3DS is by far the best model. So, yeah, once again I have to move this big old jumble of consoles at S tier. But yeah, the top of S tier is going to the new 3DS XL. Now, okay, so it's the 2DS, but now it has all the advantages of the new 3DS, like, let's just say bigger screens for the XLs anyway, bigger screens, amiibo compatibility, extra stick, although pretty tiny, extra ZR and ZL buttons. It's confusing, so yeah, I need to stop putting consoles in S tier. So, yeah, it's gonna go into S tier. No, not above. It's not as good as the 3DS XL, not to mention not as cheap, but yeah, it's still okay. I'll give it a chance. Next off, the Nintendo Switch. Finally, a Nintendo handheld that's not a DS. But seriously, the Switch does have its advantages. Because, yeah, pretty much every Nintendo fan and Nintendo nerd owns one. And yeah. So the Nintendo Switch, it's a pretty cool console, I guess. I mean, it can switch between being a home console and a handheld console. So, oh gosh. I'm having to move more consoles out of the way, guys. Hang on. And finally, the 2DS. So, yeah. The Switch, it's driving a wedge between the 3DS and 2DS, but it's a pretty good console. And next, we have the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now, I'm no expert, but isn't the Switch Lite basically removing something that was a really cool feature on the original Switch? Perhaps the ability to switch? But seriously, this thing can't switch between being a handheld and home console. it also removes another cool feature, specifically this time a controller, aka the Joy-Cons. While sure you can get one separately, it still hurts to see gamers not even being able to play this thing in tabletop mode unless they get a pair of Joy-Cons that cost like 70 to 80 bucks. I don't remember the exact amount. But it just hurts me to see that these gamers have to struggle like that. Whereas with the original Switch, the Joy-Cons come right in, the stand comes right in, so then you don't have to build one out of Lego just to be able to play in tabletop mode. You can play it on the TV, which is a pretty nice feature as well. I mean, really, Nintendo, we're not asking much. Just don't release a Switch that removes everything. Now, yeah. Really, don't release a Switch that removes everything. I mean, don't just expect people to get a Don't just expect people to have another home console. I mean, really, it's not like the 3DS and Wii U era where there's two unique consoles that you could get for home and handheld use. The 3DS as a handheld, and the Wii U as a home console. Which, for some reason, the Wii U is the best Nintendo home console. Don't argue with me, just admit it. You like the Wii U. Now, the next one is not the Switch OLED. You may think that because, well, it is the next mainline one that's not gimmicky. Meet the Game & Watch. Again. However, I would call it the new Game & Watch. I own one myself, and this Game & Watch contains 3 unique games. Well, actually, depending on which one you get, it contains some unique games on it. If you were to get the Mario one, you would get Super Mario Brothers, The Lost Levels, and Super Mario Brothers Wonder. I'm just joking, guys, but comment down below if you are also excited for Super Mario Brothers Wonder. Yeah. But anyway, getting back on topic, yeah, the last game on it is a version of Ball from the original Game & Watch series, but instead of it having Mr. Game & Watch like usual, it has Mario. Yes, sorry, Mr. Game & Watch, you will remain in Smash Bros. Forever as just a playable fighter. At least Mr. Game & Watch isn't like a lot of other forgotten Nintendo characters. Like, let's just say some of the old Paper Mario bad guys. But yeah, it plays NES games and an enhanced port of Ball. Or if you have the Legend of Zelda one, well, whatever that Game & Watch game was. Also, if you own a Legend of Zelda one for all of the mainline ones, you will get Zelda 1, Zelda 2, and Zelda Link's Awakening. So, 2 NES games and a Game Boy game, and for the Mario one, 2 NES games. So, the Zelda one's better, but we're not going to rank them separately, as if we did that with the original Game & Watch, that would take way too long. Okay, we've gotten to the last one, which is now the Switch OLED. I didn't know if you'd recognize the Switch OLED and tell it apart from the regular Switch or not, so I did the Zelda one. Yeah. So technically they're hybrid consoles, but that doesn't really matter. That doesn't really matter. We'll consider them handheld consoles as they can transform into a handheld. So this is better than the original Switch, but personally why I would like to upgrade to the Nintendo Switch OLED is for two factors. And no, it's not the pretty OLED screen. For one, I want more data to store my games on, and for two, I want the kickstand, which are two good reasons why it is higher than the Switch on S tier. So, yeah. And that's gonna be our video, guys. Like and subscribe and hit the bell so that then you can see more of my Nintendo ones. Also, here recently, 100% of my viewers aren't subscribed. And, yeah, that's a pretty serious deal on YouTube to have constant viewers that aren't even subscribed. Considering I need the subscription. Considering I need subs. 100 subs actually will equal merch. Trust me. So, that's gonna be the end of the video. So, bye.